afternoon. Thank you for joining me, Stephanie. So we're very fortunate from New Canaan Cares today to have Stephanie Kushner, who is an educational consultant specializing in college counseling. And Stephanie used to have her own business, and then this June, joined Steinbrecher and Partners. And so she merged her individual consulting practice with their practice. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of Stephanie's bio. So Stephanie brings an extensive knowledge of the college admissions process and a commitment to helping students find a school where they will have a successful four-year journey. She can also decipher the code of teenagers, which I love, because that's not an easy code to decipher, and understands the demands on their time, finding ways to make this process easier for them, not harder. Stephanie is a 21-year resident of New Canaan. She has been actively involved as a volunteer in the community in different organizations, including New Canaan Cares as a board member, and in the public school system, including service as president of the parent organization for both the elementary and high school where her children attended. She was the college liaison board member for A Better Chance ABC House in New Canaan. After leaving the corporate world where she did marketing, Stephanie started this business, and her strong communication and organizational skills, Stephanie redirected her focus to college counseling in 2016, starting graduate work at UCLA. Stephanie has visited over 60 colleges in the last 2 years, really trying to find out what the characteristics are that make each campus unique. And Stephanie earned a BA from Tufts University and an MBA from the University of Michigan. She also holds a certificate in college counseling from UCLA and is a graduate of the Independent Educational Consultants Association Summer Training Institute. That's a lot. Stephanie is a member of the Independent Educational Consultants Association, the Higher Education Consultants Association, and the National Association for College Admissions Counseling. So we really have an expert here to talk with us about that sort of transition to college. And although Stephanie works a lot with teens and their parents as they're getting ready for the college process and the application process, I think also just as a parent yourself of 3 children, 2 of whom are still in college,
Yep.
one who has graduated, she has a wealth of knowledge in both the professional and personal realm. So thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon.
You are so welcome.
All right, so we're going to get right into the questions,
Okay.
right? And if anybody's watching right now and they have questions, that you can submit them, and we have somebody here that will look for them if they come in. So, and if not, after this is over and you view it, if you have other questions, we can get those answered for you too by either emailing us or going to our website. So now we are in beginning of October today, so the excitement of the first few weeks of college is maybe dying down for some, and it may be replaced, not maybe for all, but for some, with pressures of classes, maybe sadness about being away, maybe a little bit of loneliness, and just maybe feeling overwhelmed with lots of new responsibilities. So time management, laundry, keeping to a budget, roommate concerns, those kinds of things. So at this stage where we are now, maybe 6-8 weeks into the college journey, what advice would you give to parents as they're trying to support their children?
This is also the one thing you didn't mention, when midterms start to kick in.
Yes, that's right.
And for many college students, new college students, this is their first time confronting this type of learning, where so much more of it is on them.
Yes.
So that also adds to their general stress level, now that it's not just orientation.
Yes, the newness, the fun of it all.
The dorm dinners,
Right.
some of that has transitioned. You know, this is a big change for students, clearly. It is just a huge adjustment for them, as it is a huge adjustment for us being as parents. Our kids' next path is very clear, but our role and our next path isn't quite as clear. And it's, if you think about it, the big picture, we're changing from being an active parent. We would like to believe we have control over our teenagers living under roof,
Right.
to ultimately we are mentors and advisors.
Right.
And right now we are in this transition period with them, where financially most of us are still responsible for them, yet we can't be the we can't actively parent like we did when they weren't living under our roof. And that is a big shift. And so the first and most important thing for you to do is understand for yourself that you are serving a different role than you did for your student before. It's not that your service is no longer required. You haven't been fully fired. It's just that your job is transitioning to a new one. So try to keep that in perspective and remember that change for them and for you is difficult, and that even though you're sad that this phase of your life is transitioning, you can't try to continue the same techniques that were appropriate 6 months prior when they are in college. You are fundamentally doing them a disservice and potentially even harming your relationship. They need to begin, and they want to begin to develop their sense of independence, and you need to just help support them as they develop these skills, which quite frankly, they haven't had to develop all of these skills to date. So what are some of the specific things that you can do to support your children if they call you and they're stressed or sad or tired or sick? This is also a time where make sure they get their flu shot where they're starting to get sick. First of all, like you hopefully have always done, listen. Be there for them to listen. The tricky part is don't jump right in to offer solutions.
Rush to fix, right?
Don't rush to fix. Be there as a sounding board for them. Be there to offer them guidance. Suggest back to them. If you're sick, have you gone to the CVS clinic or the health center? If you're stressed about academics, have you reached out to the Student Services Center, to the Writing Center, to the Math Center? Have you gone to office hours? If you're struggling emotionally, have you reached out to the Counseling Center, your RA, your friends from home? And be careful with the friends from home. Everyone's posting makes it look like they're having the most perfect time ever. No one is having that perfect of a time. They're all going through the same thing. One thing, of course, know your child. If you think they are prone to any kind of disordered eating or something where there's truly, you need to intervene, by all means, I'm not saying do not intervene.
Sure.
But for the typical kid, put it all back on them, suggesting steps that they can take to make it better. And by that, then you're teaching them the skills that they're going to need later in life, self-advocacy and things like that. They will need to navigate this process to find solutions. The thing you need to know is that this is not a permanent state. Today's horror, today's fact that they want to shove their roommate out the window, that they have to change roommates today, that the 3 kids who they thought were going to be their best friends, they've decided they don't like, that this class that they thought was going to be easy is really impossible. Tomorrow will be different again. They don't always tell us when that changes for them again.
Right.
So,
especially if you're not talking to them every day like you used to be.
And so it's a tricky balance between, one of the best lessons I ever learned from New Canaan Cares was don't interview for pain. Do not call them up and say, so what happened with Susie? Or what happened with that mean professor who wouldn't accept your paper late even though he told you he wouldn't accept any late papers? If they're not bringing it up, they're okay with it. And they have figured out the way to move on by it. That doesn't mean, and I strongly suggest, make sure once a week you have a face-to-face conversation with them, or an ear-to-ear. Usually now it's just FaceTime. You lay eyes on them. You see that they haven't started growing dreadlocks or gotten a face tattoo. So face-to-face is important. And that's when you can sort of circle back and do the big picture.
Right.
Tell me what happened. How are things going with your roommate? Ask if they're in the room first.
Yes.
That's when you can circle back, but don't go back in for specifics. Again, you can encourage, did you talk to that professor and explain your misunderstanding, or explain that it wasn't a misunderstanding, but you beg for forgiveness, whatever it is. That's when you can circle back and continue to support them. But for the most part, if they're not bringing it up, they've gotten over it. We, on the other hand, will not get over it until we have had that weekly conversation. But
Yeah.
that's okay. It's again letting them continue to advocate for themselves. So my sort of key tips would be a sounding board for them, but encourage self-sufficiency. Celebrate in their victories when something does get resolved and they figure it out on their own. That's an important learning tool
Really
for them.
validate that, yeah.
Encourage and don't criticize just because it's not how we would do it. Just continue to encourage and follow their lead. Be responsive, but don't interrogate.
That's sometimes tricky.
That is very tricky
Yeah.
because we're used to having more understanding of where they are, who they're with, how they're handling things. And also, and this is another very tricky one, respect their boundaries. There is some things known as too much information that we as parents should not be knowing. We still are their parents, not their friends. And understand that if they say, Mom, I can't, this is where I'm guilty, I can't talk right now, I have 2 tests and a paper tomorrow, I'm sorry. And just say, great, let's talk Thursday, whatever the date is. That, for me personally, has been, it's not hard for me to say, great, I get you can't talk now, but to help teach my kids what we as parents need, what I need, that's fine.
Yeah.
Communicate. If you've made a commitment, communicate when it's not going to work, and set the next date, plans for or whatever for what then does work. You can't give your kids a bye completely to treat you like a doormat, because again, that is a skill to say, Professor, and I use the example of a late paper. I suspect if they'd gone to the professor early enough ahead of time and said,
I'm going to have trouble.
I'm going to have trouble because of these obligations, that the professor would have been more appreciative of the late paper. And it's the same with parents and bosses, professors, friends, anyone. So that's another one. So those are some of my key tricks. One of the things that you mentioned, in addition to laundry, which is just make a cheat sheet, although tell them they can Google anything when it comes to laundry.
Yes.
But the budget can be tricky.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different ways that I've handled it, that my friends have handled it, that my clients have handled it. Some of it is know your kid, know your child, and how receptive how do they treat money? Do they treat money like it's made of water if it's yours, but hold it very tightly if it's theirs? Talk about maybe I'm willing to give you an allowance, but then that allowance is for the semester, and it becomes yours. And once it becomes theirs, I find they're much more fiscally responsible with it than they would be otherwise. I always tell my kids I'm not going to let them go hungry, but I'm not going to support a lifestyle that rivals my own when I've been working and bringing in an income. And that can be tricky also given a vast socioeconomic friend group that they might have. They're going to have friends who don't have as much as they do, and friends who have more than they do. So they might have friends who think nothing of, oh my gosh, there's a fabulous concert tomorrow, let's get tickets, it's $150, which wouldn't be an appropriate way for them to spend that $250 a month allowance or whatever that amount is. So those are the kinds of decisions that they have to make. I do believe that if you're there are our children here in New Canaan, who are very lucky, and we do give them an allowance. There are many who it's like, this is what you've been working your summers for, and that is your money. That is your savings. And, my daughter went out and got 2 jobs, not because she had friends who wanted to go out to dinner all the time. She wanted to be able to go out to dinner with them, and so she got a waitressing job in a burger place. So they get creative. When
but
they
you have to
need
sort
more
of
money.
hold to that limit too. So if you set a certain amount, you're not all of a sudden 2 weeks into the month they're saying to you, well, I have nothing left for the rest of the month. there has to be,
And
again,
some
you're
of
not
the
letting them go
trickier-
hungry, but.
The trickier places, or where the lines really blur, are Uber and all of the food delivery.
Yes.
Okay, I'd encourage you to have your child set up Uber as part of their own account. You can choose to have their own Uber account. You can choose to refund their money through Venmo if Uber is just absolutely required as part of the city that they live in.
Right.
Or the Uber Eats, like there's just no requirement for food and
Right.
cookie delivery.
Right.
So if you think it's great for them to be able to splurge
Yes.
once a week, then support that.
Yes.
But when it becomes breakfast, lunch, and
Yes,
dinner, then
yes. And these first few weeks may have been the time where they were sort of learning all that and figuring all that
Yes.
out. So it may be time for discussion at this point if you're
Yes.
seeing the bank account really dwindle.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing to watch out for, and I think it's a good tool, is if you've gotten them their own credit card, just make sure they're paying it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have this lack of understanding that it'll just get pulled, the money will appear. No, you
Right.
just spent $200 on a credit card, that comes out of your allowance.
Yeah, right.
So
right,
just
right. So
watch
those
that. You don't want to
concepts are
start
being
them
taught,
off with
yeah.
bad financial credit.
Right. But I think what you said is important because it all can be very overwhelming when you're learning all of these lessons sort of in this compact period of time. So letting them vent, letting them, explain or say what's happening. But I think it's true, like we then take on all of this and internalize it, and they feel better just by getting it out. Sometimes they need obviously some suggestion about what to do or where to go. But a lot of the times it's just they need to unload.
Yeah.
And then they can go off and do what they need to do, and we're stuck holding all this
We are
emotion.
the absorber of all their
And
crises.
Yes, but to know, like what you said, tomorrow will be a better day, 9 times out of 10.
Yes.
Yeah. And there is obviously those kids who are experiencing some mental health issues or needs, and so, just keeping, if they're totally immobilized, that's a time to reach out for help. But, okay, so anything you would advise parents not to do at this point? And what I think I'm talking about is, should you go visit your child every weekend, or should you have them come home a lot if they're feeling stressed, or because I think parents struggle with that, how much, and
I always say you are only as happy as your least happy child. And so to have a child who's not happy is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking for us. But again, you can't solve it for them. So I would say encourage them to get involved. Join a club, join an intramural soccer team, invite someone, get the courage up to ask someone to coffee who they're in the class with. Keep your door open, walk down the hall and see who's going to dinner. Be willing to put yourself out there. Bringing them home, or you going to visit them, just separates them from the environment that they're really trying to integrate themselves into. And again, I'm talking for the typical child,
Yes,
not one
yes.
who might be in need of a little bit more support. But support them through their difficult time, but don't let them leave it. The only way they're going to get through it is to find the supports themselves, to make the friends, to deal with the roommate, to find that club, to find that interest and passion that connects them to the school. And leaving it isn't really the best thing. Parents' weekend is fine, even though it cracks me up. It's like, wait, I just dropped them off 10 days ago. Even if it's 2 months later, it still feels like you just dropped them off, or fall break. That's great. Let them come home, or one of the most shocking things is when they say they don't want to come home and they're going to go visit friends at other colleges or something like that. So you can't fix it. It's sort of the same as what I said before. You can't fix it. You can just encourage. The RA, their RA typically is a really good resource for them. That is a person who is supposed to be there to help them through this transition and say, hey, well, come on and join the intramural soccer team, or Duck Duck Goose, round robin, whatever it is. So if you really see them immobilized, then I think you can reach out to the school to say, hey, can you make sure the RA is checking in on my kid or helping, they're just stuck right now. Can you see if you can have them encourage them to be involved? But you can't fix it. And bringing them home certainly won't fix it.
Okay, great. What questions should you be asking to find out how they're doing if they're not freely offering the information? And I don't want to stereotype or generalize, but sometimes boys don't give you as much as girls. It just depends on the child. But
the girls can be painful, like, oh, I found a new nail polish color that I like, and you're like, ooh. But no, the boys in general are less communicative. So just remember, not having time to call is a good sign, not a bad sign. Ignoring the commitment that they made to check in once a week, though, just isn't appropriate or fair to those of us moms of boys who are like, has he eaten? Has a vegetable crossed his lip? Did he get over the cold that he had? Whatever those just general well-being questions are that we all wonder. So I personally think, as a parent, we're almost allowed to ask anything you want to know the answer to.
Yes,
there's remembering respect boundaries and privacy and things like that. But I think it's certainly fair to ask about their well-being, their friends, their activities, how they're feeling, as a Jewish mother, what they're eating, and listen carefully for the friend names. Are they changing? And they should change. The people you met those first few days that you cling so tightly to, they will evolve over this first semester, and then probably you'll start to see a more consistency of friends' names. But ask about their friends, ask what they're doing, ask what they're involved in. Many of us are paying, and it is fair to expect a little bit of feedback on what our money is getting them. The other piece that is important, it is, and this is difficult to say as a college counselor, it is almost more important what you make of your college experience when you are there than where you actually go to college. So you want to make sure that they are taking advantage as much as they can in things that would be of interest to them.
And so many colleges offer so much.
So much. So I always say, go and get your money's worth. And then I'd like to hear the interesting things they've done. What were the speakers? And it's not because you're grilling them. That is where you have to make sure. It's not because I'm judging you. It's not because I'm interrogating you. It's because I think what you're doing is really interesting.
It's natural curiosity, like genuine curiosity.
Genuine curiosity. And if I figure out how to make that not annoy some boys like my son, I will let you know. I still get the, but no. So just remember, not having time to call is a good thing. I think there's very little that's not fair game. The obvious things are not fair game. But you get to ask.
And I think too, trying to find ways to ask open-ended questions, where it's not just a yes/no answer. And sometimes that takes a little creativity to, did you have fun? Could be a yes/no answer. Tell me what you did. Could be, you could maybe get some more information.
Exactly.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. It's tricky when you have no clue what they did all weekend, and you're like, what did you do this weekend? Studied. I said to my son after 2 years, I said, I'm worried about the school you picked. I think it was required too much studying on your part. And he's like, what? And I said, it seemed like all you ever did was study. He's like, no, I just knew that if I answered that question that way, that then we could move on to something else.
Did you come back at some point? But
yes, he is coming back.
Yes.
He is coming back.
All right, so the other question, and you probably answered this somewhat, but is about academics, because there's no school portal anymore. You know, you can't go online and check the grades. Even though you're paying, you
Yeah.
don't have that access that you used to have. So how do you advise parents to sort of have that conversation about grades and classes without being too intrusive?
Well, one, you can have set up a parent account typically,
Okay.
so you can see grades. But understand that grades, they may not see grades. You know, there could be 3 assignments that are going to make up an entire academic
Yes.
grade.
Yes.
So it's just not the same. I think, but a piece of that is, are they going to classes? Trying to suss out if they're actually attending classes. I think I took tuition and total fees divided by literally how many classes they're going to, and said, every time you skip class, it's $100 and some dollars. So don't do that. But again, getting a sense of where are you, how is the homework going, are you caught up? I just think you have to be honest about those conversations, especially if you have a student who you're worried about more of the executive function skills, boys. So if you're worried about some of those executive function skills, then I think that's where you want to just say, look, I'm here to support you, and I'm here to be another checkpoint for you. So let's figure out how we can structure that conversation so it doesn't back you against the wall, but I'm here as a support person for you. The other thing is, a lot of schools have those types of resources. And especially if you have a child who is on any sort of accommodations, then the accommodations work completely differently in college. But many of them have ways to help support particularly executive function time management skills. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until they've dug themselves into a hole. And this is for any sort of accommodation. Get it set up before your child gets sick, or before they're in a hole academically. Set them up for success.
And I think too, if parents haven't had that conversation before they've sent them off to college about, you know, we're going to check in, we're going to talk about grades every once in a while, or how can we have that conversation, then when they come home for a break, maybe after the midterms or Columbus Day weekend or whatever it is, you could have that conversation at that point. It's not too late to say, let's do it a little differently now because you kind of fell behind. Or
I have had friends who have done 2 things that I thought were somewhat creative. They said, every time you get a grade, if it's a C, I give you $5, if it's a B, I give you $10, and if it's an A, I give you $20. Well, that was really an incentive for their child, regardless of the grade, to report it. Because they were at least hoping for $5. If it's a D, there are bigger issues. But so that was one creative method that they had taken. The other is that they had said to their children, whatever's the appropriate GPA, if you can maintain, we expect you to take out a certain number of loans per semester, $3,000 of the loans will be in your name. But if you hit pick your number, 3.5, 3.7, we'll take on those loans. That's a big incentive for students. And it can be $1,000. It can be whatever is appropriate if the parents are in a position to do that. But certainly that can be an incentive for some of those students who are tighter with their money.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think we really talked about this too. If you sense your child is really struggling, what's the best way to intervene without being a helicopter parent? And you had suggested maybe calling the school, asking the RA to intervene, that kind of thing. Is there a time where you think you just go in and you sort of say, okay, this isn't working anymore? Have you had that experience with either kids you've worked with professionally or in your personal circle?
Not that I've worked with professionally, but in my personal circle, yes. And I think it is less a factor of which school they are attending than where that student is emotionally at the moment that they're going off to school. And so the question is, how and when do you intervene? And I have to say to parents, you know your child best. I would encourage them to put their head down and get through that first semester. Things change a lot by the end of the first semester. usually for the better.
Mhm.
So really, really try to encourage them to
at least complete that
at
first
least
semester.
complete that
Mhm.
first semester.
Mhm.
It's difficult to transfer
Which
as
is the next question.
first,
Yes. Yeah.
jumping
Yeah,
ahead.
no, that's
but
okay.
as a first semester, first of all, not many colleges will take spring admits, particularly freshman spring admits.
Okay.
But the other important thing is the colleges have because there are no grades available to them, they have no more information to go on than they did in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not presenting any sort of a new story unless you're at NYU and you realize you really needed to be in a rural, remote environment. I mean, that kind of gross miscalculation might suggest you'd want to transfer more quickly. But I think your child would be incredibly proud that they have gotten through this difficult situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
General timelines, though, would be a November 1 due date if you can find a place to transfer for spring,
Okay.
or March would be for the following fall. Worst case, you really need to bring a child home. I would encourage them to remain part of a college environment, even if it's taking classes at a local community college, while hopefully they're getting therapy or learning some other social skills that will help them be more successful in a college setting.
Okay, so sort of continuing that college career, even if you're not on a campus anymore,
Yes,
or
unless
at the
of-
original school.
Unless you are needing some sort
it's
of
more
intervention
extreme than that.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
right. Okay, so generally, trying to finish off that first semester, and then if you're considering a transfer, spring is harder, is what you're saying, than trying to transfer in the fall of the next year.
So I'd say stay for the year.
Yeah.
The 3 colleges where my children went, they never required tuition payments very far in advance.
Okay.
So don't let them try making decisions now or even October. You have until mid-December. Check with your colleges
for the
second semester.
Okay.
And so much can change. Especially when they start to get the positive feedback. I did well in that class that I thought was so hard.
Yeah.
Or I found a group of friends that I really liked.
Right. And sometimes that just takes time.
It does just take time.
And I look, when you said before about the social media, they're seeing maybe all of their friends posting all the, the best of themselves, which we know we all do on social media. But that can be alienating and frustrating if you're not in that boat.
Yeah.
So trying to keep that in perspective.
Well, and I would suggest that if you looked at their social media, they're portraying the same positive image that all of their friends are portraying.
Right.
Everyone feels the same way.
Yeah.
Everyone is having the same
Trying to
insecurities.
normalize that for them is, I think, huge. Yeah. Okay. And I think too, what you mentioned before about if they can stick out the semester, they can feel really good about themselves, and it also gives them that sense that you believe they can do it, which is huge. So, all right. I think that's all of my questions. Anything else you wanted to say before we end up?
I don't think so. Just deep breaths. And,
Yes.
And it's a tricky time as we transition as parents
Deal
from
with our own
our
feelings.
different roles.
Yeah. All right. And New Canaan Care is always here to support you. So, thank you so much, Stephanie,
You're
for
so
your
welcome.
time. All right. Take care.